So a Philidor position looks something like this, and the characteristics of this position are as follows. The defending king is usually on the back rank right next to the corner square and behind his own rook. Also, the defending king is located at a knight's move distance from the attacking king. The attacking king in turn is located at a knight's move distance from its queen, and the queen generally controls the corner square adjacent to the defending king. Make sure the queen is not on any other square. The queen has to be on this square which is at a knight's distance from its own king. Now this exact Philidor position can take place on different parts of the board. So this is on the top queen side of the board. On the same part of the board it may look something like this. Again, the same position can arrive on the bottom part of the queen side board, which may look something like this, or it may look something like this, or on the king side bottom part of the board something like this or like this, or on the top part of the king side of the board something like this or this. So now let's understand how to achieve a checkmate in this Philidor position. Now I know most of you must be thinking how to even get to this Philidor position at first place. Well, that part I will teach you in one of our upcoming videos. So when you reach this Philidor position, make sure that it is black's turn to move. Why? Because if it is black's turn to move now, then whatever move black plays on the board will simply worsen his position. That means black is in zugzwang. So if he moves the king over here, then we can simply play queen to a6 with a double attack on this rook, and now white can easily win the game after queen captures rook, king to e8, queen to g7, king d8, and now queen f8 checkmate. Let's go back, and if here black decides to move his rook on one of these squares, then we can either checkmate the game or capture the rook immediately or win the rook with a fork tactic. But before I show you how that happens, let's first make sure that it is black's turn in the move in this position. But what if it is white's turn in this game? What should white do then? Well, if it is white's turn in this situation, then you will have to execute the triangulation technique. Now, what is the triangulation technique? Well, basically you have to move your queen in a triangle so as to come back to the same exact position on the board, but with black's turn to move. So because it is white's turn to move and we do not want to change the position on the board, so we will do triangulation. And how exactly will we do that? We will move our queen first to the d5 square, then to the a1 square, and then back to the a5 square. This is how we will move our queen in a triangle pattern. So let's see this in action. So queen to e5 check. Notice if the king comes in front of your king giving a direct opposition, then you can immediately checkmate the game. Therefore, he will not make this mistake. The defending king will either move to the a8 square or the a7 square. Doesn't matter where he moves, whichever square he moves, we will move our queen in the triangle format that we have decided. So now next we will take our queen to the a1 square. So queen to a1 check. Now the king has only one place to go, that is the b8 square, and now we will complete the triangle with the move queen to a5, and see, we have reached the exact same position but have now passed the turn to black. It is black's turn to move and black is in zugzwang now. So as we already saw, if black makes the mistake of moving his king, then we can simply fork this rook. The king moves and now we can simply win the rook and finish off this game. Let's go back. So therefore black will try to move his rook in the game, and these are the number of squares where it can move to. So let's see how to win this game irrespective of where the rook moves. So if the rook moves to one of the adjacent squares to his king, then he will either get checkmated or he will lose the rook. So if he plays rook to a7 attacking our queen, then we can simply finish off his game with queen d8 checkmate. Let's go back. If he moves over here, then he loses his rook. So therefore, these two are not the good squares for the rook. Now, if he tries to move to any one of these squares, then the rook will simply get captured by our pieces. So even these squares doesn't make any sense. Now let's look at the remaining yellow squares. How can we finish off the game if he moves to one of these squares? Now, out of all of these yellow squares, 3 of them are dark squares. That means if the rook moves to any one of these dark squares, then we can easily fork the king and the rook in the next move. So let's say if he moves over here, then queen d5 forks both of the black's pieces. King moves and the rook is gone. Similarly, if the rook comes over here, then we can fork again with queen to d8 check, king to a7, and queen captures rook check, and we can easily finish off the the game. Same is the scenario for rook to g7. Rook to g7 simply loses to queen e5 check, forking both the pieces. If rook blocks the check and counter checks our king, then we can simply capture the rook and check the opponent. King moves and now it's a checkmate. Let's go back. And if the opponent decides to move the king, then we can simply capture the rook and now we can easily finish this game. So these were easy ones, right? Now let's look at the hard ones. The hard ones are the light squares away from the king, and those are this f7 square, the h7 square, the b3 square and b1 square. How can we execute a checkmate if the rook moves to one of these squares? So let's look at them one by one. So let's say the rook moves to the f7 square. So the opponent king is on a dark square and the rook is sitting on a light square. So we can't immediately fork both the pieces. So here we will execute a series of checks in order to change the position of the black king so that we can fork both of these separated pieces. Now there are a lot of ways to check this black king. We can check it from here, here, here. We can also give a check from here, also from here. But out of all of these squares, which would be the best one? Well, to find the best square, first understand what are we trying to achieve. Well, if you carefully see, the black king at any given point of time can never come on the c8 square or the a6 square. Why so? Because if he comes on either of these squares right in front of our king, then our queen can easily checkmate the black king at the back rank. Correct? For example, after the queen check, if he comes over here, then this is a checkmate, right? Same is the logic here. So that means if the black king comes in direct opposition with our king, then our queen can easily checkmate the game. And since he is restricted in the corner of the board, at any given point of time, he will have at most only 3 squares to go. And those are 1, 2 and 3. These are the only 3 squares where he will be able to go. The corner of the board, these 3 squares. Alright? So taking into consideration these facts, we can now choose which one of these checks would actually help us win this rook and a faster checkmate. So if you try to give a check from one of these squares, then king can simply move to the c8 square, and now you cannot give check from here because it's controlled by the rook. So you'll have to give check from here, and then this will simply increase the number of moves required to achieve this checkmate. So that is why these squares are not good. Now out of these 2 squares, which one is the best? So you can play either of these, but the best square would be to check from the e5 square. And why this is the best square? Because if the black king moves the king to the c8 square, then you are threatening a checkmate over here, right? So he cannot make that mistake. So you are forcing the black king to move to one of these squares. If he moves here, then he loses the rook because it's a fork attack now. So the only good option for black here to play is moving the king to the a7 square. So since these are the only 3 squares where the black king will be continuously moving, you should find the key squares on both of these lines. So on the 8th rank, the key square for the white queen to aim for is the e8 square, because if the black king is on the 8th rank, then you can get your queen to the e8 square, attacking the king as well as attacking the rook over here. Similarly, on this file, the key square that you should aim to get your queen to is the a2 square. Now why a2 square? Because from here you can attack the rook as well as attack the king. So that means this fork attack will happen either on this square or this square. These 2 squares you should aim to get your queen to. Alright. Now since we know our key squares, let's try to get our queen to one of these squares while simultaneously attacking the black king. So since my queen is already controlling this square, I don't want to leave this file. So I will check the black king by remaining on the same file. So queen to e3 is the best move to play over here. Again, if the black king makes a mistake of coming here directly in front of our king, then he will quickly get checkmated. Therefore, he will either move to a8 or b8. Doesn't matter where he moves, because whichever move he plays, we are simply gonna win the rook with queen to e8 check, attacking both the pieces. The king moves and the rook is gone. King moves and now queen a2 is a checkmate. Now, let's go back and understand how to fork both the pieces if the rook decides to move on the h7 square, which is farther away from his own king. Again, first we will try to find the key squares to attack both of these pieces together. So since we are aware that the black king will move in only one of these three squares. So let's first find out the key squares that the white queen should aim to get to in order to attack both of these pieces. So on the 8th rank, the key square would be the g8 square, because if your queen comes on g8, then from here it can attack both the rook as well as the king. And another key square to aim for would not be on the a file, but it will be on the b file, and that is the b1 square. Now how did I find out? See, if the queen comes over here, then it can check the black king as well as attack this rook over here. There is no square on the a file which helps me attack the rook which is sitting on the h7 square. Therefore, the key square lies on the b file. Alright, now that we know that the key squares to aim for is the g8 square as well as the b1 square, let's strategize accordingly as to from where to check the black king. So again, we have many squares to check from, but the best square here would be the queen e5 check. Why is this the best one? Because if the king comes here, we can simply checkmate, and if the king comes to any one of these squares, then he is losing anyway. So let's first see how we can win the rook if the king comes to the a8 square. So if king comes to a8, then notice we cannot come here and give check, right? Because the rook is controlling. If we come here, then we are nowhere even closer to rook, because the king will simply come over here, and then how do we attack both the pieces? It's not possible. So that is why here we will go to the a1 square, the corner square. Now why are we going to the corner square? By coming over here, we are asking the black king to leave this a file. Now the only move the king has is to move to the b8 square, after which we can simply come to the b1 square, our key square, and attack both of these pieces. King moves and the rook is gone, and now we can easily win the game. Let's go back. So if the king comes to the corner, then we can get our queen closer to our key square and subsequently end up winning the rook. What if he moves to the a7 square? Well, again in that case, we will come closer to this key square, which is the a1 square. King is forced to move, and now check, attacking both the pieces. King moves, and now the rook is gone. Now you have already seen how we utilize the b1 square. Now you must be wondering, what is the point of this g8 square? How can we utilize this square as well? Well, let's say you do not play the best move. Let's say you play queen to b4 check. Then king moves, and now queen to a3 check. King moves, queen b3 check. King moves, queen a2 check. King moves, and now you can get to the g8 square, attacking both the pieces. King moves and the rook is gone. So you understood how we can first find out the key squares where the queen should aim to go for, and then with a series of subsequent checks, we can win the rook and checkmate the opponent's game. And now you will show me how to execute this checkmate if the rook comes on either one of these squares. Let's say the rook comes on the b2 square. What is the winning move for white over here? I know this was easy. The winning move is queen e5 check, forking both the pieces. Now let's go back. Now tell me, what if the rook comes on the b3 square? First tell me, what are the key squares that you would aim to get your queen to? So since the king would be moving in only one of these three squares, so one square would be on the a file, and that is the a4 square, and the other square would be on the 8th rank, which is the g8 square. So the key squares are the a4 square and the g8 square, because from the a4 square the queen can attack the king while simultaneously attacking the rook. Also, from the g8 square, it's possible to attack the king and the rook together. So since now you know the key squares to aim for, can you find the best winning move for white over here? So the winning move over here is queen to e5 check. Other moves like queen to d8 check or queen to c7 check also works, but it will just take longer for the checkmate to happen. So that is why the best move here is to go on the e5 square. So queen e5 check. Now if the king comes over here, we can checkmate it. So he will not come over here. He will go to one of these squares. Let's say he moves to the a7 square. Now can you find the best move for white over here based on the key squares you just found out? So the best move over here is to play queen to g7 check. Now you must be thinking, hey ma'am, why didn't we go back to the a5 square? But that's where we came from, right? We don't want to go back to the same square and repeat moves so that your opponent gets a chance to draw the game by threefold repetition. So don't do that mistake. That is why we are going to the g7 square, closer to our key square. So queen to g7 check. Let's say the king moves to b8. Now what is the best move for white here? Well, it's very simple. Moving on to the key square, queen to g8 check, attacking both the pieces. King moves and now we can easily finish off the game. Now let's go back and see if you can solve the most difficult position on the board. And that is when the rook moves to the b1 square, farther away from his king. So, can you find the key squares in this position for the queen? So there are two key squares. One square is on the A file and that is the A2 square, because from here we can attack the rook as well as the king together, and the other key square is the H7 square, because from here we can attack the rook as well as the king. Notice that from the 8th rank we cannot attack the rook in any way. That is why there is no key square on the 8th rank. So our key squares are A2 and H7. Let's try to get our queen to one of these squares. Can you find the best move for white here? Well, there are a lot of moves. You can give check from queen to d8 or queen to e5 or queen to c7. All of these moves win, but the fastest way to win this game is to check from the d8 square, because then you're forcing king to leave this 8th rank and come on the 7th rank where our key square is. So king moves to a7 and now find the best move for white. Again, there are a lot of ways to check, but the best move here is queen to d4 check. If you thought of any other move like queen to a5 or queen to e7, even that works. That's fine. It's just going to take an extra 1 or 2 moves to finish off the game. But right now, let's go on with the best move. Queen to d4 check. King moves to b8. And now, what's the best move? Well, the best move here is to go near to our key square. So we will play queen h8 check, king moves to a7, and now the next move is easy. Yes, I am sure you must have guessed it already. Queen h7 check, forking both the pieces. Like this video and subscribe to my channel. And now here is the question of the day for you. Can you tell me the best move for black here? Let me know your answers in the comments box and I'll see you in the next video.